Good morning, everybody. Today I'm going to teach you how to do this little motif here. A friend of mine sent me this really adorable crocheted bag, and it was created by making all these adorable little motifs. Now, there's a common misconception that this is called a granny square because it is, in fact, a square. That's wrong. A granny square is actually a very specific stitch, and that's this here. I have another one for just to show you, what the difference is. Yeah, I did have it on the right side. So this is a granny square. And the reason this is a granny square and this is not size difference. It's because this is literally just three double crochets and then some kind of chain and then three double crochets and then a chain and then three double crochets all the way around. Whether you change colors, regardless of what you do, your granny square is always going to be three double crochets. Now, this is considered a motif because it's similar, but a motif actually can be any any shape. You can do a motif in a circle, in a square, in a rectangle. My mother-in-law had this amazing book that I sort of inherited from her. That's It's called Beyond the Square Crochet Motifs, and when you open it up, it's just got 144 different motif patterns. Let's see if I can get this in here a little better. It's circles, hexagons, triangles, squares, and other unexpected shapes. I've done a few of them, and they're really cool. So these are called motifs, and they're worked in the round usually. There's all sorts of different ones in here, which is really cool. So check out if you want to grab this book, I'll try to find you a link for it. But yeah, this has a bunch of different motifs in it, which is really cool. But my friend sent me a picture, and that's literally all I got was a picture, and I turned around and I created a little pattern out of it, that I wrote down just for reference for myself, which is gonna look ridiculous to most people because it's just a bunch of numbers and letters. Essentially, there's no actual words. And I know for some people that crochet, they can't read patterns, so it's a little difficult for them. So we're gonna create this today. This is essentially like a sunflower or a flower motif with a granny stitch around it. So today I'm using some leftover size 4 worsted weight yarn. I think they're all Red Heart. I couldn't tell you for sure just because, well, I've had them forever. So let's go ahead and get started. I also have an H hook today because she wants them to be kind of as small as possible. And with a worsted weight, you'd normally use an I hook. But for this today, we're using an H hook. This actually measures about 3.5 inches across. So it's about three and a half, about. So because it's a little wonky and I don't block my work. So this is actually 3 3/4 of an inch. And it should be that squared by the time you're done. And it is. So you're going to need that. You're going to need your hook, a pair of scissors, and the other thing you're going to need is because you are going to have to tie in all of these strings, you're going to need a yarn needle. Now, my mother-in-law used to leave a piece of yarn attached to them so she could find them easier, especially in your bag with all of your, crochet hooks. So I just kind of kept that tradition, and that's what we're doing. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with a magic ring. Um, I don't know how to do the magic ring, so I do my magic ring. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. My magic ring is literally a slip stitch. So I always wrap the yarn around two fingers like this, and then around the back, I'll just bring up a loop in between my two fingers. Now you want to pay attention to this loop because that's where your crochet hook is going to go. So you're going to grab this, you're going to pull your fingers out, and then you're going to grab your full yarn end and the end of the yarn. And you're just going to pull that knot tight. And now you have this giant loop out here. And the reason I call it my magic ring is because, see, it's a slip knot. And slip knots are amazing because it means you can tighten or loosen it at will. So then we're just going to attach this to our hook. Okay, so my magic ring is literally nothing more than a slip knot. And I think that's how the magic ring is actually made, but I couldn't tell you because I didn't understand how to do it ever. So the first thing I do is I will put my finger in the loop here, and then I'll hold this yarn end down here and just kind of hold it all together because I want to make my first stitch as close to this actual knot as possible. And the reason that we do that is so that when you do this here, you don't have like a huge gap between your knot, which if you look close enough, you can see, and your first stitch. Even when you pull the string in the back, it closes it, but it's never going to get tight without causing some kind of weird bump. And we don't want a weird bump. We want it to look very pretty without the weird bump. Like you see this kind of little weird bump here, but it's minuscule. I mean, unless you're looking for it, you can't see it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just chain one. And you're going to do that in there. You're going to chain one. Now, regardless of whether you're starting with double crochet or a triple crochet or half doubles or singles or whatever, my recommendation is always to just do a chain one. With double crochets, people will tell you to do a chain 2 or 3, and the chain 3 will create your first. I hate that unless we're doing the granny stitch, and then that requires it. But they're so close together that it doesn't matter. So now that we've got your first one, now we want to do the half double. And our first go around is half double, which let me actually tell you how to do that. Sorry about that. All right, so a half double is similar to a double crochet, and that you're going to yarn over. You're going to wrap your yarn around your hook, and then you're going to insert it into this loop, yarn over again, and pull through. So you should have 3 loops on your hook like this. And then you're going to yarn over again and pull through all 3 loops. So that creates your first half double crochet. And we're going to do that for a total of 12 times. So this is number 1. So let's do it again. Yarn over, insert, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through all 3. So there's number 2. Now I'm going to continue. I'm not going to skip through this so that you guys can see how I do it every single time. So that will make these videos just a bit longer. But I know that it helps a lot of people. So, and then that way, if you want to skip through it, you can skip through it. So there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. The yarn ball's rolling into the screen. 10. All right, so there's 12. Now, you see how this yarn end keeps trying to come up through here? Try not to let it come up because then it makes it makes your knot not work, makes your knot not work as well. So now what we want to do is what's called slip stitch. So what you're going to do is you're not going to yarn over at all. We want to slip stitch into this first stitch here. And I'm sorry that I used a dark color to begin with. So slip stitching means you're going to insert your hook straight in to the top of your very first stitch. So your very first stitch is over here at the beginning of the circle. So you want to slip into that, and then you want to yarn over and pull this through like that. So you should have 2 on there. And then you want to pull that through that other loop. So that would be a slip stitch. And what that does, and I always pull them really tight. And the reason that I pull them tight is just so that way it closes it up and looks seamless. You want it to be as seamless as possible. So I always pull those really tight. So now that we have that done, that is going to form and I just pulled this like super, super tight because I want to close up that center as well. So now that just created the very center. We just created this part here, right here. So now you can go ahead and fasten off. And whenever, if you read patterns and you see it says fasten off, the best way to do that is just to chain one and then go ahead and cut your yarn. And then just pull that loop all the way through. So now you have like a little knot at the top and it's pulled it through. So now we're going to switch colors. We want to do the next part is going to be this white part. Now this white part is done in a 3 double crochet cluster, otherwise seen as 3DC cluster, in a pattern. So that's the next part that we're going to do. And that's going to be, once again, like I said, in double crochets. Let me undo this yarn ball a little so it doesn't end up in our shot. Now you can attach this yarn, you're going to attach this yarn to any of the stitches here. I like to go backwards one stitch so that way when I get to this stitch, I can stitch around this yarn tail. And that way I don't have to sew in ends. I despise sewing in ends. I loathe it. It's like the worst thing ever. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to I always just hold my yarn in the back of my work. I'll insert into the top of the stitch here like this, and then I will yarn over, grab the yarn, and just pull through like this. And then you want to just yarn over and pull it tight. That's going to be your fastening. You're going to fasten onto it. Then you're going to chain 3. You're going to chain 2. You're going to chain 2. We want to do a double crochet cluster. So you're going to chain 2, but it's going to look like 3 double crochets. Let me turn off this light and see if this makes this a little bit more visible. A little. Maybe it'll be better in the final. I'm going to turn the light back on. All right. So now that we have this 2 double crochet, or not 2 chains like this, now you're going to double crochet. So you're going to yarn over, insert into that exact same stitch there. And I try to hold the yarn tails together so that you're stitching around them. And the reason to stitch around them is so that you don't have to sew them in. So now we're just going to double crochet, but you're not going to fully double crochet. We chained 2, and then you're going to yarn over and go through the stitch, yarn over again and pull up. So you should have 3 loops on there. And then you're going to yarn over and pull through 2. Now, normally for a double crochet, you would yarn over and pull through 2 again. We're not going to do that. This is a 3 double crochet cluster. And the 3 double crochet cluster means we need to create 3 double crochets before we finish them off. So here's 1, 2, now we're going to do another one. So you're going to yarn over, insert into that same exact stitch again, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, and now you should have 3 loops on your hook like this. And you should have what looks like 3 unfinished double crochets. Now you're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. So you have something that looks like this. Okay. Now you're going to chain 3. So 1, 2, 3. I'm going to move these out of the way just a bit. And you're going to yarn over and then insert into the very next stitch. And we're going to do that cluster stitch into each and every single one of these 12 half double crochets that we had in the beginning. So if you're already understanding how to do this, you can go ahead and, fast forward ahead. But I'm going to show a couple more of these before I forge ahead as well. So there's 1 and 2 and 3. And then pull through all of those. 3 chains. I'm going to move these out of my way completely now. And now you're going to do the same thing into the next one. So there is 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, and 3. And then we have to close our stitch. So you're going to just close it up like that, finish it off, and then do your chain 3. So 2, 3, and I'm going to go ahead and finish now. So this 3 double crochet cluster can be used in a number of different ways. I've seen it done as 2 double crochet clusters. I've seen it done as 4 double crochet clusters. It just depends on what the pattern calls for. I've created quite a few different things using this stitch. It's one of my everything is my favorite stitch. I'm kidding. I just I use double crochet a lot. Muscle memory tells me I should always do a double crochet. So even when I try to do half doubles, um I try to do a double crochet. Like with that sedge stitch the other day, that was something that kept throwing me off because I had to do a single and then a half double and then a double crochet. And so that was just throwing me off altogether. Um, Double crochet was the first stitch I learned. I take that back. Single crochet was the first stitch I learned, but double crochet was the first stitch I really truly understood. Um, and was able to do without like really looking at things. So like currently right now, I'm not even looking at what I'm doing. I'm actually looking at my video screen to make sure that everything that I'm staying in the screen um while I crochet this, which is kind of silly, but it's just how I work. I don't know why. But all right, so we're getting to the end and I'm going to show you how to connect to this. And once again, we'll connect with a slip stitch. A lot of things connect with a slip stitch. When you're crocheting in the round, you're almost always going to connect them with a slip stitch. The only time you don't is when you want to crochet in a spiral. And I've made some hot pads and things like that. I call them trivets. They're really thick. I do 2 strands of yarn, like I'll hold like 2 together like this, and I do that in the cotton. And so it makes it extra thick, which is really nice. So that way, you have that really thick hot pad that you can set something that's really hot on and not feel like, oh no, it's gonna burn through, the heat's gonna melt, whatever, blah blah blah. So we should have 12 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So we do have one more. I wasn't sure if this was a stitch or if that was the or if that was a slip stitch from the previous round, but now that I look at it, it's not. It's an actual stitch. So here we go. Let's do our last and final cluster. All right, so here is the cluster. We're going to close that up and we're going to chain 3. Now, in order to connect this with a slip stitch, we don't want to connect it to this chain 2 here. We actually want to connect it to the top of the cluster. So you're going to find that big stitch here, that big one that connected it together. And you want to slip stitch into that. So you're going to insert your hook into that stitch, into the top of it. And then you're going to grab your yarn and pull it through. And then you're going to pull through that loop that's already on your hook. Okay. And then once again, I always just chain 1 and then I can just chop that off like that and then pull it through. And now it's tied off completely. And it's going to look a bit funny until we get that third and final row on. And then that third and final row will kind of square it off. Like right now, it's looking like a circle. And that's totally fine. We're going to then turn around and we're going to do this granny stitch out here, which is literally nothing more than 3 double crochets and then a chain 1. And we're going to do that in each of these chain 3s from before. So let's go ahead and get that piece going. Let me get my next color yarn. You can do this all in the same color. You can do this in different colors. The original pattern that I looked at was in like sunflower color. So the center was brown. This was like a goldenrod, and the outside I think was white. I think, or like a black or something. It's just an outside border. So same thing. I always connect in. You want to connect in one of these chains. Oh no, look, I didn't do a chain here. It's okay. So because I've already fastened it off, normally if it wasn't fastened off and I was still attached to this white yarn, I would just undo this and go back and do my 3 chains. I'm actually going to show you why it's totally okay to not undo this. I'm going to pretend that this is a chain 3 when I go back and do my granny stitch around, and I'm going to make sure to point out why, or not why, but how I just pretend this is a chain 3 and just make it, bigger. But so we're going to attach to this one, the one right before the slip knot, or I mean the slip stitch, join, and you want to, you know, join on like this, and then for the granny stitch, you have to chain 3. So go ahead and chain 3, not counting your join. Please don't count your join as one of your chains. I prefer you to not do that. So, because if you do, it's going to be a lot shorter, and you want it to be the same height as your double crochet. So this is going to be a double crochet stitch all the way around. And we're just going to mix in some chains as well. So here's your first. This is going to count as your first double crochet. So there's one. We're going to yarn over, go through this chain 3, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through 2, yarn over, go through 2 again. So there's 2. Now we're going to do a third one. 1. There you go. So now we have 3. Now you want to do a chain 1. You want to chain 1, and now we're going to jump over to this chain 3 space here. And I'm just going to move all of these yarn ends out of the way. Okay. So now we're going to do the same thing. 1, 2, and 3. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to create our corner. And to create a corner, we need to do 2 of these in this one and separate them by a chain 3. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So the first thing you're going to do is 3 double crochets. So 1, 2, and 3 double crochets. Then you're going to chain 3. So 1, 2, 3, and then 3 more double crochets. So 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to continue to do this all the way around. You're going to create 2 3 double crochets with a chain 1, and then you're going to create your corner. And I'm going to do that with you. I'm not going to fast forward. So let's go ahead and get through that. Let me move that out of the way again. All right. So here we go. Chain 1, and then 3 double crochets into this chain 3. So 1, 2, and 3, and then chain 1. And then we're going to do it again. 1 double crochet, 2 double crochets, 3 double crochets, and then we chain 1. Now we've done our 2 sets of the granny stitch. Now we need to create another corner. Okay, so now we need to move over here, and to do a corner we do 3 double crochets. So 1, 2, 3. Creating a corner means not chaining 1 but 3. So 2, 3, 1, 2, and 3 double crochets. And then chain 1. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the end, and then we will fasten off. And the next thing that I'm going to show you how to do is how to actually slip stitch them together. It makes things just a bit easier slip stitching them together. You can also do what's called a whip stitch, where you sew them together. It just depends on what you want to do, how you want to do it. I will show you the slip stitch, and then in another video I will show how to whip stitch. I hate whip stitching because you have to cut a certain length of yarn, and if you don't know how long your project is, you have to cut multiple lengths of yarn, and it can be super frustrating. When I created my first granny square blanket, which was the very first blanket I ever made, it had almost 200 squares in it, which was a lot. I didn't know how to slip stitch to join. My mother-in-law tried to teach me, and I was having so much trouble. Um, you see how this is a little wonky right now? You can do what's called blocking, or you can just, like I do, not block. I hate blocking. Blocking means getting this wet, setting it out, pinning it, and literally pinning it so that it's in a perfect square everywhere. And I don't have time for that. Okay. I have 11 chickens, a 4-year-old husky, a 16-year-old daughter, a husband. I have a household to run, um, and, and, and a garden to tend to. I just don't have time for blocking. I just don't. I mean, if you have the time, great, wonderful. You do you. But I don't have time for that. I make a lot of our food from scratch and things like that. So, um, because of that, I just don't have time. All right. So remember how I said I was going to show you how to fix this without actually fixing this? All right. So here we go. Fixing this without actually fixing this. I'm not going to fix it. I'm not going to take it out. It's such a pain in the rear end. So every one of my projects has some kind of mistake like this. It just does. Um so in this particular thing, this is actually going to end up being our corner. So we're actually going to have 6 double crochets into this tiny little space, and I'm sure you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, how are we going to do that?" Well, um easy. We're just going to do it. We're just going to force them in there. So, here we go. 1, 2, and I'll show you how it doesn't matter because it squishes it in there. 1, 2, 3 for our last corner, and then you're going to do 1, and then 2, and then 3. Okay, and then we have to chain 1 because we have to join to our very first one, correct? So now we want to join to this top of this chain 3. So you want to do a slip stitch into this one. And because I chain really tightly, I have to use my nails to move the yarn over the hook. But you most likely won't need to do that. I crochet so tight. Um, all right. So now we're going to fasten off like normal. And I cut it before I actually fastened off. So you chain 1 and then just pull. Okay. And see how it's all just like kind of weird and wonky, right? Like it's just weird. That's why people block. Once again, don't have time for that. I just don't. Um, so I'll just sit here and go like this and just kind of, you know, pull it out. But the other thing is when we stitch these together, which I'm going to use that dark blue again. I may even use the white so you can see it just a bit better. But I want to use a different color on here so that when you put them together, you'll see what I mean. You can see the difference. Um, Whip stitching requires you to use. Um, I am going to use the white to show you how to whip stitch real quick. You're just gonna cut like a length of yarn, and you're gonna put it into your hook. Now I have this yarn needle. I'm sorry, not into your hook, into your needle. I have this yarn needle, and the reason it's a yarn needle is because it's a giant hole back here, so that you can put your yarn in there. Like obviously, you're not gonna get a regular thread sewing needle and attempt to put this giant piece of yarn through there, right? Like that's just ridiculous. So whip stitching is where you take, you get all these ends out of the way. You're going to take your 2 corners like this and you're going to put them together. And whip stitching requires you to literally insert into here and you're going to pull through. And I hate whip stitching, so bear with me. Okay. And then you're going to just go through each top of each stitch. And you're just going to, this is all whip stitching is. This is called whip stitching. Now, the reason I don't care for whip stitching is literally only because it's sewing. And sewing is just so daggone slow. It just is. The other reason I don't like whip stitching is because unless you're using the exact same color, you're going to see this weird little stitch through here, right? And so normally if you whip stitch, you would just do this all the way up. Okay? I'm not going to do that. Whip stitching is cool and all, and maybe for some things that works, but I just don't like the way it looks in this particular application. So now I have to pull it out. But that's whip stitching. So that's one way to connect your granny squares or your motifs, whichever one you're doing. Like right now we're doing a motif. So that's one way to do it. Another way to do it, which I prefer, is you're going to take your yarn and you're going to create your slip knot, tie it off, okay, like this. And then you want to insert your hook into just the back loop only, like this, and then pull up in the back loop on your other one. Okay. So that when it's laid out, it's going to look like this. Okay. So you have the two back loop only. Back loop only. Okay. Only the back loop. And if you look, you have two loops at the top of each of your stitches, right? So you have the two stitches, or the two loops. So you want to do into this back loop here. And when I say back loop, I mean the one on the back of the thing. Because if I were to say back loop on this one and then back loop on this one, you would think it would be this one. No, I want it to be the back loop so that you're looking at the back of your work. Okay. So now that we've done that, now we're going to slip stitch. So you're just going to take and you're going to grab your yarn and you're going to pull through both of those blue pieces, those back loops, and then you're going to pull through this white one. Okay. And you're going to do that all the way up. So you're going to go into this back loop here, come up through this back loop here, grab your yarn, pull through, and make sure that you're not doing this too tight. First time I did this, I did it tight and it looked ridiculous. It pulled it entirely too tight and it didn't work. I ended up having to cut my yarn and take it out, and it was just, oh, it was such a nightmare. It was such a nightmare. Going into the back loop of this chain is going to be a bit difficult for me, so bear with me. But I may even just say forget it and just go into this chain like this, which I have done before, and then just do it that way. The only reason I do the back loop on the actual stitches is, let me show you. Let me pull this out a bit so you can see. Is so that when you put them together, oh my goodness, what a nightmare this is over here. All right, it's not laying down. Okay. When you put them together like this, you want to be able to still see the outline of this one here and the outline of this one over here. Okay, of each block, but you want this really pretty chain to go all the way up. Okay. Let me finish this so that I can show you what it looks like when it's finished. And then that way you'll have that all the way around every block so that when you stitch it together, it looks very pretty together. It just does. Whip stitching is always an option. There's even a couple of videos out there that I will tell you I have not perfected this particular technique. It's where you granny stitch them together. I'm still working on that. That's still something I just have not perfected. I don't like making granny squares because usually you have to sew them together. But when my mother-in-law passed, I found containers upon containers upon containers full of granny squares. Granny squares that she just, oh, I only have this much of this yarn left. So she would just combine it with this yarn, and that's how we got this. That's actually where I got this from. This is from her buckets upon buckets of granny squares, which I have to put together. I've started putting together. I just haven't finished. My daughter picked some out. She wanted to make a bag with hers. She found some really pretty, like, they were brown, like different brown tones, or maybe they were the green ones. I don't remember. But she picked some out that she liked. She picked out enough to be able to make like a granny square bag. Um, And I think that's what I was doing with it, was making a granny square bag with it. And then I was using black to tie it all together. So this is a very tedious, slow part. This 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 slip stitching them together. This is something I don't like doing either. So just FYI, it's gonna take you a minute. Okay, so I'm just gonna go ahead and I'm gonna tie this off so that I can show you what it actually looks like. Give me a minute when it's laid out. Doing granny squares, motifs, whichever way you look at it, will constantly leave you with a ton of yarn ends to sew in. Okay, you're just gonna yarn ends for days, people. Yarn ends for days. It's insanity how much there is. But so once you get that together, now you've got this sewn together. Now you have your first two pieces sewn together. As you sew them together, slip stitch, whip stitch, whatever you decide to do. This is a slip stitch again, everybody. When you slip stitch them all together, you start creating, this beautiful, design where it's these are together, and then maybe you sew this one in, and it doesn't matter if they're all different sizes. As you do that, it squares them out. That's why I don't bother blocking my work. It's why I have, when I make my big patterns, whether it be something like this, my my background is actually something I crocheted because I'm at my computer desk. My computer desk is this gorgeous, mouse pad, and it's gorgeous, but it's not a good background. So, but even when I do something just like this mat here, I always have a foundation row. My foundation row is literally just just one line. And then on my sides, my sides are almost completely straight. So you don't have to block your work. It's all about tension. It's all about, how you sew them together. Depending on what you're making, you can put in foundation rows. It's why I try to add in tips and tricks. I'm sorry this video ended up so long, but remember, you can always skip through as feel comfortable doing something. You can just skip through once, you've seen me do 2 or 3 of these. You're like, oh, I understand how to do this. And so you just skip through to the end until we're ready to do this part or whatever it is. But sewing in your ends is going to be something you're going to have to do unless you crochet over them like I did here. I crocheted over these, so then technically what I would do is, because it's me, I would just then come back and just snip that off right there. And then now that's done. Because I fasten off everything to where it's like a knot, I never have to worry about that coming undone. As long as you don't snip it too close to this knot here, it won't come undone. It's why sewing in ends is so important. So like, for instance, this one here, put it through this, and then like sewing in your ends, what I would do is I would take this and I would push it through this stitch here and come through the back, and you want it to be in the back of your work. You never want that sewed in end showing on the front. So I would come through the back here and I would just go in here, and you're just going to keep like kind of literally sewing this one piece of yarn into the other pieces of yarn. And it's so that it hides it, and it hides that knot. And then once you snip it off, it's done. It's hidden like that. And then you have no more little bump up here. Okay. All right, guys, as always, like the video, leave me a comment. Please subscribe and follow. Go check out my Etsy page, my Facebook group. I'm also on Truth Social. Whether you view this on YouTube or Rumble, I hope you have an amazing day. And as always, keep hooking.